Adam, I'm super excited to welcome you on the podcast. Thanks for joining. I'm excited because you are the AWS hero. You are the Java champion. You have all the AWS certifications. You focus on Java Enterprise as a developer and architect. So who else to talk about the Java ecosystem and cloud if not you, right? So welcome on the show.
Yeah, well, I think there are 10 million other Java developers who really like Java, so not only about me. So I'm really glad you invited me here. Nice office you have, by the way.
Awesome. Well, these days, everything is virtual, so so
Yeah,
is the background.
yeah.
Awesome, great. So, very cool. We can kind of look at what do you do also from two different angles.
Hmm.
One is the Java Enterprise, and the other is the AWS Cloud.
Hmm.
So you work in the
Hmm.
intersection of both. So to recruiters who are listening to this podcast, why don't we kind of explain first, like what is this Java Enterprise? Because they may know
Hmm.
what Java programming language is, they may know the
Hmm.
frameworks,
Hmm.
Spring Boot and
Hmm.
others. But what do you kind of imagine when you say Java Enterprise?
Yeah, and maybe so executive summary, because this is really interesting. From developers' perspective, enterprise Java is boring. For managers, it's maybe exciting. Why? I started in Java at the beginning. And the problem back then was it was Wild West. So we had like maybe 30, 50 different application servers, and they had nothing in common. So it was impossible for a team to understand more than three. And the problem was solved with Enterprise Java. So with Enterprise Java, they say, okay, stop. We have a common set of APIs, and all the providers, vendors are coding against the APIs. And for me, was the best idea ever because I was consultant back then. I said, okay, now it's my time because now I have only to understand, the enterprise APIs, and I can be productive with all the vendors. So, and this is how enterprise Java happens. So the story is a little bit longer, but this is the my story. And the interesting part from there, I only stick with enterprise Java. Even now, I still use the same APIs in my current project, serverless projects. And why big companies love it or my clients love it, stability. So the changes were incremental, they were backward compatible, and basically developers had more vacation. So there were no strange migration projects and no dependency hell. This is why
Mm.
what Java EE or Enterprise Java provided is a kind of structure. And there's another event which is really relevant to AWS Cloud, but this is the short introduction to
Mm.
Enterprise Java. Why it's boring for developers? Nothing changes for years. Why is exciting for big companies? Nothing changes for years, right? So this
Mm.
is this is actually the duality of Enterprise Java.
That's a good one. That's a good one. And there may be some people who consider Java as technology that is a bit obsolete just because
Mhm.
there are these hyped programming languages and new frameworks like JavaScript, Angular,
Mhm.
TypeScript, React. So would you say that Java is here to stay, or is it one of these technologies that companies rather transition
Mhm.
away?
So I consider Angular and React as almost obsolete, but it is not going to replace by Java. It is
Mhm.
going to be replaced by web standards, my perspective. So if we see right now, the web standards become more and more popular, and plain JavaScript becomes more and more similar to Java. Actually, if you take a look, it is almost type safe and so forth. And in my front end projects, I'm not using Java, but I'm not using framework either. So we have a framework-less or no dependencies. We use web components, a little bit lit HTML, and but this is the same philosophy as in the backend, interestingly, right?
Mhm.
So there is no dependencies, stability, and so forth. So I think Angular is not used that much in forward-looking companies. React still, but even now React gets hard time, and I think the future is just web standards. So and in the backend, I think Node.js, no competition. I would say Node.js is also fading out a bit. When competition is specific projects, not even Go, maybe Rust has some momentum right now, right? But what's interesting about Java is since Oracle bought Sun, innovation happened. This was like 10 years ago. They are iterating like crazy. And the new Java features, productivity wise, are excellent, I would say. For instance, we get virtual threads. What it means is we can have millions of concurrent processes for free without any strange, reactive programming frameworks, whatever. It's just plain old Java code became suddenly thousands of times more scalable without any change. For instance, this happened with Java 21. So lots of innovation happened. And I
Mm,
would say whether Java is how to say a cool technology or not, what happens since Corona pandemic time is actually money. So lots of companies spend a lot of money in the cloud for nothing. And to that point, that I got some questions: should we now move back to our data center because cloud is too expensive? Fact is, Java consumes is very performant. This is number 4. So if you there was a study from Google, and like the first 4 languages is like, I remember, C, Ada, COBOL, Rust, and Java. And if you consider Python or Node, they are orders of magnitude slowest in Java. And
mm,
if you do something serious in the cloud, orders of magnitude means you pay orders of magnitude more money, right? So I
mm,
would say Java is a good suit pot. Is actually boring, simple language and crazy fast, and it
mm.
saves energy. And as you probably know, there's a European law April this year. So we will have to show how much CO2 we are saving or not. So this is why I'm actually chasing deadlines like crazy, because right now I think this is the big time for Java again.
Oh wow, that's interesting. With
Mhm.
regards to those frameworks and web standards, it's interesting how things kind of circle back, right? Because
Yeah,
15 years
full
ago,
circle again.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah, full stack, full cycle, full
yeah.
circle.
And the cool story is in Node.js land, they now recognize they have too much partitioning and fragmentation, and they thinking now about a standard like Java E in the
Mm,
backend, which is interesting. This is the Winter CG group, which thinks about standardizing the backend, which is of course funny for me, because like, oh, Java E and enterprise Java is heavyweight, and now history repeats in JavaScript land. And
mm,
funny enough, in my projects in Java, the Java language is so powerful that, for instance, in event-driven architecture in other AWS cloud, we just use plain Java without any external dependencies. And a thin framework like Quarkus, for instance, which is a revolution, um, we use only like as a replacement for a microservice where we need to know an HTTP endpoint. So if we
mm,
need an API, in this particular case, we have a Quarkus. But if we react, let's say, to bucket changes, file upload, event bridge, external partner event, then we use just Pojo's lambdas. They look really one method, one parameter, and you are done. Yeah.
mm. Wow, wow. Well, that sounds awesome. I mean, the good days start or restart for Java developers again,
Mhm,
which kind of reminds me the different roles that you see on the market now. You work as the Java
mhm,
enterprise developer and architect. So these are two roles
mhm,
that you wear
mhm.
every now and then. What are some of the other roles that you have seen on the market, and some of them that maybe are growing in the future?
Mhm. Um, in my project currently, what I don't know, accidental or not. So how we are working usually a team of 3 to 4 people and one product manager. This is what usually happens. And we need someone. The most effective teams, of course, is if someone really knows deep about the domain, right?
Mm,
So I'm an external consultant, architect. So if I join a project, I always try to to get hold of someone who really knows what we are doing, right? And I would say PM role is important one. Architect role is less relevant, or at least we need something like a strategist role. For instance, why we're doing something. For instance, so in one of my current projects, we go full serverless for a reason. And so we try to minimize the operation costs, right? If you try to minimize the operation costs, you cannot just deploy EC2s, Docker, or whatever, because you need a visionary. So whatever you call it, okay, this is the path because we have this and this constraints, and this is why we used, for instance, S3 and not RDS. RDS is relational database, and S3 is a bucket, for instance, right? And this is someone maybe who explains the choices. Maybe it is an architect. You call it architect, but yeah, someone who follows the path, or defines the path together with the business. And in Java, we have the same. For instance, in Quarkus, there is a standard called microprofile. So you can say if you use that, we are less dependent on Quarkus. But in some project, we have high, performance requirements. Then we say maybe we should use the internal Quarkus stuff and don't care about the standard, but the implication is we have to update more often. So you know what I mean? So they're all, I don't know whether this is architecture, maybe it's a designer, because architecture is bigger, right? Architect would, for instance, say, okay, an enterprise architect, these are the applications and they work this way. This is important at the beginning, but at the end, we usually get REST APIs, which we call, and we get the open API or whatever we have, and we just call the APIs for a year and we are done, right?
Mm.
So overall, I would say what you should have is fun. So if you perform, if you will hire someone, I would say, if I ask questions, I don't care whether someone knows a lot of Java or not, but if someone is eager to learn, she or he is in, I would say, because in shortest amount of time with Java, you are crazy productive. So you don't need, a specific knowledge. This is just very easy language to learn. And we have a great tooling. So we have type safety refactoring is stellar in Java. You cannot compare it, I think, with other languages. So I would say the requirements are low. And also in the cloud, if you think, let's say, serverless, right? We don't even have threads because these threads are managed by clouds. So I would say in such projects, you can just, focus on business and be very productive.
Well, it sounds like Java is the good programming language to focus on going forward. And you mentioned a few roles, including developer, architect, project manager. Do you recommend recruiters do some like, in other words, like what should be some of the aspects of these roles that recruiters should focus on while screening candidates? So
Okay.
imagine you would be let's say working with a recruiter, you look for a developer or an architect. Like, what are some of the questions that a recruiter should ask before sending you a candidate?
Mhm. So let's talk about the optimal, how to call it, how we call it, candidate, right?
Mhm.
And I think in 2 weeks I'm talking at a conference, a bigger one, and the title is like, you know what the EJBs are? Enterprise Java Beans. You heard about that?
Yeah, I heard, but I don't really remember.
Yeah. This is like the EJBs who are not very famous, but they worked, right? But this is like old technology. And what I do at the conference, I will talk, the title is like, hey, EJB developer, now is your time. So what happened is all the concepts of application servers and EJBs, what we had, and even host, and even CGI scripts are one-to-one relatable to, for instance, AWS Lambdas, right? So I actually don't care whether someone knows the current AWS technology because it is easy to learn, at least with Java. What I would care, do you understand concepts like CAP, consistency, availability, partition tolerance, Do you understand the difference between thread and a process, Can you explain, please, consistency? Why consistency is important? Then we have, we have the ACID transactions and we have base transactions. What the difference? Because this is the basic understanding you have to understand everywhere, cloud or not. And cloud is even more important because you have to understand, S3 supports a certain type of transactions. DynamoDB supports a specific type of transactions, and other resources are not transactional at all. So and if it's not transactional, we have to do something on the use case level, to compensate the inconsistency in the system. And I would say these questions I would ask, and I would even bother whether the answer is correct or not. Rather know whether she or he got the idea, what I'm asking, and because nowadays you can look up everything. I have no expectation that something knows everything out of the cuff. Most important thing is to understand the problem during the interview and provide somehow viable solution. And then I will ask you where you will look it up. If it's okay, ChatGPT is also fine. I don't care, but how you gain the knowledge and how you be productive. This is the most important thing.
That's
And I did
very
it all the time. So and sometimes I got the best, best developers with students who were crazy motivated. And after 2 weeks, they were very motivated, had fun in the project, were better than one guru, who is
Wow.
convinced about way of doing this, forget it about in team about such a thing.
Very, very interesting. Very interesting. And you mentioned AWS. So this is one of the cloud providers, and also you are the AWS hero, right? So would you say that the knowledge of one specific cloud is usually more important than the overall kind of knowledge of cloud? So in other words, if you have a Java developer, Java architect who only specializes in cloud, AWS, for example, is it relatively easy to transition to Azure or not?
It is easy, but so why AWS? I'm doing a lot with AWS because AWS was the first, and this AP and Asia and everyone try to catch up still. So
Mm,
it means the most stable APIs and services you get with AWS right now. And in my role, I'm not only architect. Sometimes I don't know how to call it. Client calls me and they ask me, we have to build this. Which technologies to choose? And everything starts with the AWS calculator, and I was okay. We do this, you will pay this per month, or we pay as we go. So we start with the price calculation. If you go to Asia, for instance, the price calculation depends on the SKU. So this is there's a basic tier on premium tier. So for every service, like for instance Asia functions, which are comparable to AWS Lambda, if we go there, so okay, if you need, private networking, it's complete different service. It's still called Azure Functions, and it operates completely differently. Or I say, okay, can we go in the so this is a little bit harder for me, to estimate the cost because this is a far more complex, like
mm,
complete tree of decisions, which is not very obvious. In AWS, is more obvious. You pay the same whatever what you're doing there, and so this is one. And I think cost-driven development is a huge part of the architecture.
mm,
Because if we do not consider costs, then we are done, right? Then I will just buy the biggest machine on AWS, put everything on it, and I'm done, right? Or two machines with load balancer. I
right.
mean, why we are talking about architectures is only because of costs. There are 300 services, and we pick the right most cost-effective service. This is the deal with the cloud, which is, by the way, complete opposite to on-premise, because there is not such a thing like costs. You're paying maybe for RAM or CPU, but not whether you have Akeda on Kubernetes or not. So this is, you pay for Kubernetes regardless what you're doing inside, usually on-premise.
Mm,
And in the cloud is completely different. So now, why AWS? You mentioned Java. A most important thing in cloud is automation. And the automation is this what makes you dependent on the cloud. This is almost forgotten in most projects. People are thinking, oh, we're using Terraform, we are portable, which is not true at all. Not because the APIs are completely different. So in AWS, we do infrastructure as cloud with Java. So it means we have full stack Java. So we are building the cloud with Java and we're shipping with Java. So this is called CDK, Cloud Development Kit. And I don't know whether you heard about tools like Maven and stuff like this. So
mhm,
these
yeah,
tools are used for years in Java, and we can build reusable cloud components, store them in Maven, and make them reusable across teams. So this is unique to Java and AWS, and this makes Java developers crazy productive on AWS. On
mm,
Azure, we use Bicep. This is an Azure-specific language, so it means there is some transfer, thing to do, but the idea is very similar. It's not Java, but at least you have for loops and if statements, so you have to build, your infrastructure on Azure with Bicep. But the transition is, I would say, from Java business code perspective, interesting enough, no change. We can
mm,
migrate our business logic one-to-one without any change, or a Quarkus microprofile application from AWS to Azure Functions. No changes. What changes is how we provision the infrastructure, because of course, the Azure function comes with complete different set of attributes as AWS Lambda.
Very interesting. Very interesting. You also mentioned that there are about 300 services on AWS these days, as of 2024 April, and there will be a lot more in a few months. And I just remember how it started. I don't know 12 years ago when we used AWS on one of the
Mhm.
in one of the companies. So in like I'm kind of wondering how can a developer or a cloud engineer catch up with all of these solutions? Like is it even possible for someone even with your level of certifications to remember all of the 300 plus services?
It is actually fairly easy. I tell you why. Because if you start, with a project right now, I would start with serverless. Because why? No operations. Everything is managed by cloud. It is our Java mindset. So what I forgot actually the biggest feature from management perspective. Why my managers really loved Java E and Enterprise Java was there was a clear cut separation between infrastructure and business logic. So the
Mhm.
application servers were operated by one department, and we build the business logic without knowing even what application server is used. And this logic was so-called web archive or EAR. War was at the end. It was like a zip. We copied it over. It was deployed. The funny thing is, serverless is the same. So on AWS or Asia, or they are managing for us even Java. So there is nothing to bundle, nothing to ship, no Dockerfiles, nothing. We
Mhm.
only create the business logic. It's not a war, it's a function zip, but it's identical. And we copied it over and it gets installed, right? So what means is now we have the business logic on the cloud as AWS Lambda. Now we try to work with it, and now let's say, okay, but one call takes 5 minutes, and Lambda has limit, let's say 30 seconds, so we cannot use Lambda anymore. So then we look up another service, and the logical, you will find it immediately, is ECS Fargate. So okay, then we know just copy over everything to Fargate, and now we pay the entire time, but the code didn't change, the infrastructure changed, right?
Mhm.
Now from there we say, okay, do we have to call the service from outside? If yes, we have basically four alternatives. There's the application load balancer, HTTP API gateway, REST API gateway, and CloudFront. And which to choose is money. So the ALB has cost. You have to pay the entire month for it. HTTP API gateway is less features, is the cheapest one, but you pay per use, per invocation. REST API double as expensive, more features. And CloudFront is has not that many features, but you get better certificates. So this is basically the story. So what I'm saying you right now, we have the basic decision, and then about persistence, right? So you say, okay, if costs, if you're thinking serverless, DynamoDB or S3 are the only options. If you really need a database, then RDS. And from there, now we have everything. So we need CI/CD. Then we use, of course, code pipeline is a good choice. Code build, and we are done. And now all the other services more like do we need text to speech or text extraction? So we need extract. So see all the other complementary services. Or Bedrock we use a lot for LLMs, for instance. Bedrock is a nice facade to Claude, Anthropic Claude, and stability. So you get nice REST API. So, but this is not like you have to know all the other 300 services. It's more like you have to know maybe five. And
Mhm.
then if you have a business case, before you start coding, look up these services. This is the thing, and you will find these services. And I think in the cloud, you should write more glue code and don't try to reinvent the wheel, because the situations are different. We are in the cloud to use as much as possible, and we are on premise to have open source frameworks. There are two complete opposite strategies, I would say.
Very interesting, very interesting. And there is so much really. If you dive deeper, to cloud and
Mhm,
also Java
mhm,
development. So, with your experience, would you say it's better for software engineers to focus on either or? So, let's say become really good with cloud engineering and get to know about the DevOps, CI/CD, and AWS? Or would you say that they should focus on Java Enterprise, for example, and become really good in developing and architecturing
mhm,
applications? Because you seem to work on both, right? But
mhm.
you are very senior, you have certifications. But what do you say is the kind of future for people who are out there and wonder how to take the career to the next step?
So first, you have to be passionate about something, right? So if you are passionate, it's already a good sign. But to really, if we, for instance, work with what I didn't explain right now, I mentioned Quarkus without explanation. And Quarkus is revolutionary step in Java. It works completely different to Spring Boot, for instance, from inside, not from outside. Namely, what Quarkus is doing, it at build time, it analyzes the code, removes unnecessary dependencies, removes reflection in Java, which is slow and unsecure, and reads XML configuration, throws away the XML configuration, and generates highly efficient bytecode.
Mhm.
Which means Quarkus starts under a second and consumes less memory than prior empty Tomcat, let's say, years ago. I don't know whether you remember Tomcat, Jetty, all
Mhm.
these servers. So
Yes,
this is
yes.
the smallest runtime you can have. And this is the foundation for everything we are doing, Quarkus. So if you put Quarkus on Lambda, Quarkus doesn't know that it runs on Lambda. This is the cool part. So you don't have to change your code. So it means you could actually start on your machine, develop the application, put it on Lambda, runs on Lambda. You can put the same code in Docker container. It runs on ECS or Kubernetes. So even in some projects, we ship the same code several times because, for instance, what you could do with it, you can say on ECS Fargate, we have one small service task which runs the entire time, and we pay 40 euros a month. And for the scaling events, we use Lambda, but this is the same code behind the same load balancer. So I would say for a starter, start in your local machine. Then I would say start a Docker on your local machine, and then with infrastructure as code, you can go to my GitHub repository. You can clone it, and there's funny story. I have an workshop attendee. He is, I think, over 75 years old. I had the podcast with him, so it's not a problem. And he
Nice.
was a lawyer, and he wanted to become now software engineer. And he wrote his own software. You should actually interview him. This would
Nice.
be fun actually. And
Nice.
and he had own software. He wrote his in the US, and he picked my GitHub example with no experience with AWS, and managed to deploy his software on AWS. So it is really easy. I mean, now we have the
Wow.
example, right?
Wow.
As a lawyer, but it was a really interested lawyer, but a lawyer. So I would say it is absolutely manageable for a Java beginner to do the same. Start
Mhm.
locally and then deploy to the cloud and gain experience. And the best would be a fun project, like
Mhm.
maybe something with LLMs because it's fun. That your recipe app or whatever you get, a fast feedback. This is what I would suggest.
Very interesting. I mean, it's so easy these days to deploy something in the cloud. The
Yeah.
AWS and other cloud providers, they make it so easy. There is no
Mhm.
kind of hurdle. It's
Yeah.
just to invest time
Mhm.
and get to it. Awesome, cool. I'm kind of wondering, once you start working with recruiters, for example, we already discussed how they can help you kind of pre-screen candidates. From top of your mind, like, is there anything that recruiters could do better in terms of helping you find the right people to join the projects that you are working on?
Yeah, recruiters become nicer last time, right? So the last last years. Before that, it was terrible, but right now, actually good experiences. What I could do, at least, prepare and ask somehow reasonable questions. I remember back then the questions they asked were, I mean, there was like without any understanding, and this what annoys developers. This is what I would say. But I don't think. I mean, recruiters should also understand the problem first. If someone hires someone for the cloud, I would ask the company why you are in the cloud. I mean, would you like to save money, or you need the scalability, global visibility? What's actually the reason? And then, if you know the strategy of the company, ask questions. Which are compatible with the strategy of the company to the candidate, because this will make sense. We need someone who is able to save costs. So what you will do in such a scenario, or maybe creative questions. So if you will build a small application, what you will do. So this maybe and just you don't have to understand the answers, but you can write down the answers and then ask someone else, make it sense or not. What do you think? So this will be my approach. But I'm not a recruiter, so I have no experience what they are doing, but this is what I will do, right? So just ask questions. um, there's if you search internet for serverless, you will immediately see um, the startup time problematic. It'll say there's a startup time is slow. So if you know it, so okay, how to deal? What is the startup time? Is it a problem or not? So maybe you can search for problems in certain technologies, or Java is bloated. You go to someone and say, hey, enterprise Java is bloated, old school museum technology. What do you think about that, right? And if there are good arguments, I think what matters, logical and good arguments would get back, right? Because
Mm,
whatever we know now is obsolete in 1 year anyway. So what you can just ask the attendees or candidates is, are they flexible? Do they understand the bigger problem? And
mm,
are they adaptable to the problems, right? So this.
mm. No, that's very cool as you say it, and everything changes so quickly.
Mhm,
We already discussed the frameworks and everything.
mhm,
One of the things that recruiters also struggle with often is how to make the corporate projects a bit more appealing to candidates. And you kind of already mentioned that Java Enterprise is great for managers and boring for developers, right? Because it doesn't really change. So imagine you have a project, it's a corporate project, and you are looking for a developer or an architect to
mhm,
join the project. Like, what would be the best way to sell the job opportunity to a candidate? Like, what are the aspects that you
mhm,
or recruiters could focus on?
mhm. So first, there are actually no more corporate projects. I have to think since Corona, all my corporate projects are very similar to startups, I would say. So this is like, from the technology perspective, no difference. Maybe the corporate projects are more organized, which is a good thing. So I worked with some developers from startups. I mean, they copy code over. No one knew this would be not acceptable in corporate environments, I would say. So it's just a little bit more structure, which is good thing, because you also would like to have vacations or have a weekend, not then on
Mhm,
Friday everything breaks down. So I would say, from the use cases, uh, enterprises, even I would say even more interesting, because right now the LLM happened right now, but LLM is already working. If you're in startup, you have to figure out whether it works or not, and you spend a lots of time churning, calling the APIs. What I did, I get throttling requests without a reason, but now it is working. So I would say now is more fun than 1 year ago. So because enterprises are a little bit behind, at least if they start to do something, we can rely that is at least it will work, right? This is the first thing. And from the boring perspective of Java, it doesn't matter a lot anymore, because what I remember, why people hated the enterprise Java, because they wanted first, to create their own logging framework, then caching framework, then configuration framework. And the problem with enterprise Java, everything is solved. You don't have to do it anymore. And in the cloud, even more. Why you need a framework on Lambda if we have CloudWatch, which aggregates, all the logs? So this is no more necessary at all. Threads do not make any sense. So I would say, what's cool is you can do more interesting stuff, right? You can automate the entire cloud with infrastructure as code, and use Java 21, for instance, or 22 features to really automate the entire pipeline. And this looks like magic, right? Then you could, you have all these 300 or more services which you can potentially use. And by the way, right now, most enterprise companies allow it. So they don't have blacklist. You can do whatever you like. So this is, I would say, the unique opportunity to have fun, learn a lot, and have also some budget to achieve cool things, right? Which is not always true for startups.
Wow, well, this is such a great answer. I mean, I'm so excited now about Java.
Yeah,
Like,
you have to learn
I
it. So,
feel.
after this, I can show you some cool stuff. So you will, stop your podcast and do Java afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. It feels like I should do something with Java. It's so cool now because back in my mind it was this obsolete technology from 20 years ago. But of course, it's not the case. As you mentioned, since Oracle purchased the business, so that's very cool. Very cool. Awesome.
If you like, this is not related, but I have an YouTube channel with
Hmm.
shorts. And
Hmm.
recently there were 500 shorts about Java. So in 60 seconds, I hack something like
Oh,
every day. So you take a
okay.
look, from scratch, how efficient it is. And I get sometimes, there was a funny comment. Someone asked, what you are using JavaScript. This is not Java. I was like, no, 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 this is Java, because the code is all
Hmm.
in. I mean, the problem was, right? So there were some developers back then, and they became architects right now, and they prescribe, the old architectures 20 years later, which didn't make any sense.
Hmm.
But I have the feeling that since Corona, it's changed. Now everything is flexible. Everything is more. I would say everything is allowed. All right. So like, you can do whatever. makes the company successful, which is a good thing. So now we
Mm.
can write lean code again. Back
Yeah.
then, you had to write 20 layers without any sense, lots of
Mm.
XML who no one understood, right? So this was the problem back then.
Nice. And as a recruiter, how do you recognize someone who is still using the old architecture or kind of living in the past instead of following these new trends and being at the forefront of the innovation when it comes to
Yeah,
Java?
recruiter, I would ask, how many layers do you need in an application? Do you think, three-tier application is a good thing? So what you can do, you can look up the old Java architectures patterns and ask questions about that. And the answer should be, on premise, maybe in serverless, there are no layers anymore. So you see, that there's a basic understanding, because the enterprise patterns, they had different goals to follow, right? As you remember, back then, we Java developers were afraid that there would be a new vendor and we have to rewrite all the code. So everything was decoupled.
Mhm.
But in the cloud, I would like to use the cloud. Why you should decouple everywhere if I like actually the service, right? So the strategy is different. So I would say in the cloud, I'm writing a very lean code. And if
Mhm.
something changes, which basically never changed on AWS, but if it would change, so I would change, the piece of logic. I don't care. So because we have now immutable infrastructure, every change, maybe the most important question is, no, also interesting. Look, you are in charge of the project. What do you do first? And what I will expect is to have a CI/CD pipeline to automate everything from day one.
Mhm.
So this is the most important thing, to automate everything, that every commit deploys the entire infrastructure.
Mhm.
Later, impossible, right? So such questions maybe, and
Mhm.
this is what I would ask. Yeah, but I didn't. Very good questions you asked me, but I didn't prepare from the recruiter
Mhm.
perspective, right? So,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
by the way, there's a company, German company. I really like the company, and I asked the CTO how they interview the developers, because there was a nice, atmosphere in the company, nice culture, and they had interesting questions. So the one asked, what's on your computer desktop and why? Or one question what I really liked is, what is your favorite editor and why? And
Mhm.
back then we have lots of Java editors to say, okay, and if the answer was like, I don't care about my desktop, this is a bad sign. But say, okay, there's nothing on my desktop because I have this and this is already good answer. Or I have everything on my desktop because I like to see everything also good. But if the
Mhm.
answer is I don't care, bad sign, right?
Mhm.
What's your
Wow.
editor? If someone answers whatever you like, I don't care. But it says I'm really passionate IntelliJ, great refactorings, and I have that. This is a very good one. I like
Mhm.
Visual Studio Code, but I don't care if someone likes IntelliJ. Then I would at least know the reasons why. So maybe
Mhm.
ask a very trivial questions and look. Is someone really excited about the answer, or is just business as usual? Then it's maybe a bad sign in the cloud. But because you have to be excited. It's a great technology. Why not, right?
Mm. Yeah, well, now I'm so excited about this technology as we just discussed.
You see, then you are
Well,
hired.
good
So
job,
I
good
will
job.
ask you the next project. Yeah, you will work as Java developer from
Yeah,
now.
yeah. Well, I used JavaScript, I used PHP back then. I used a lot, but Java was always kind of on the bottom of the to-do list or to learn list.
Mhm.
But anyway, now with the excitement that I got from you, I guess I guess I'll need to look at your shorts. And before we wrap it up, I mean, just following up on these YouTube shorts, where can people find a bit more about you, where they can connect with you?
Mhm. So my name is Adam Bean, and if you search for Adam Bean in Java, you will find a lots of links. And I have a blog. This is adambean.blog, and YouTube is Bean Adam because it was already taken. GitHub, if you are interested in the project I told you, they are open source. This is Adam Bean. There's like the templates with infrastructure as code. GitHub is Adam Bean. So usually everything is Adam Bean. Blue Sky is
Mhm.
a new, is an interesting platform right now. It's a like Twitter clone, but really nice. So you should also join Blue Sky.
Mhm.
And Twitter, of course, I'm on Twitter, YouTube, and this basically it. So I'm not on TikTok, not on LinkedIn, not on Facebook. No time for that. So just this.
Mhm. Yeah, awesome, awesome, cool. We will include the links in the show notes and in the comments on YouTube. Great. Well, then, thanks a lot for sharing all these insights and tips and excitement for Java and AWS. So thanks again.
Thank you.